Morning, everybody. What's up, and welcome to the NFL Brekkie Show. You know Laurie Horesh. I'm Phil Murphy. We are pleased to be joined by ESPN NFL analyst Ben Solak. We're going to be handing out our Dirty Thirdy Awards because, everybody does end-of-seasons awards, mid-seasons awards. We do it a third of the way through because we have enough of a sample size, 6 regular season weeks down of 18. Why not figure out where we were right, where we were wrong, what we like looking ahead? But throw out the rundown at the top, Ben. We had two significant wide receiver acquisitions by both halves of yesterday's Monday Night Football game. Bills go into, I don't want to say into New York because they're a New York team. They go into North Jersey, beat the Jets by 3. In the hours afterwards, the Jets acquired Davante Adams for a conditional third-round pick. Will likely stay that way unless Adams has a great season or the Jets make a run. And the Bills acquire Amari Cooper from the Browns for a third and a sixth. They're also sending back a seventh. It's a lot there. What were your takes from this division leader and this playoff aspirant in the Jets adding some beef to their wide receiver core?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Davante Adams to the Jets was about as predictable as an in-season trade gets in the NFL. Usually, these are kind of hard to figure out how they're going to go. This one felt kind of projected since Adams made it clear he wants out of Las Vegas. Adams is going to help. Of course, he is. He's a very good receiver who has a lot of chemistry with Aaron Rodgers. The question is, how much can he help? Right, this Jets passing offense stuck in the mud pretty much all season. 24th in success rate. They're very traditional Aaron Rodgers-y sort of stuff. It's like got to be hyper specific on the routes, and we're constantly adjusting things. And like, there's not a lot of yards after the catch. There's not a lot of creativity. And so Adams is going to fit right into that. He's going to become target one right away. Like, I've no doubt he's going to be productive and Rodgers is going to be productive. I'm not convinced that this offense is going to suddenly go from, mediocre to elite the way that I think a lot of people were hoping Rodgers would have that impact on this team. And so definitely a floor raiser. I think the ceiling has a lot to do with like, can this line play better? What's Garrett Wilson's role going to look like? I think it's the other stuff that kind of will limit just how good this offense can get.
I think when we look at this trade, I mean, possibly the worst kept secret in the NFL, that this drumbeat had been building for so long. That hamstring, I mean, pick your meme, right? I saw the Undertaker meme, with Davante Adams' hamstring being revived. I saw the Kevin Nash whip the blanket off the fake cast. My leg's all right. I immediately thought of when we take it back to the infamous Tom Hanks. Well, it wasn't Tom Hanks. The Tom Hanks vehicle, Forrest Gump, but young Forrest breaking out of that brace and starting sprinting. That seems to be the swiftness with which that hamstring is probably healed for Davante Adams now that he's a New York Jet. But look, this one makes all too much sense, but it wasn't the only one, right? Phil, you said the other side of Monday Night Football, the Buffalo Bills, and we could see that that wide receiver production wasn't there. Keon Coleman will take some time. Perhaps he wasn't the most, route crisp rookie to enter the NFL. Khalil Shakir has obviously had perhaps a bigger role than some that didn't know him as a household name, and a bigger, really a vital component of that passing game to seemingly give it some juice and keep it going. Dalton Kincaid, despite being a top 5 fantasy pick in every single one of your top 5 tight end fantasy pick in every single one of your drafts this season, or coming into the season, probably hasn't produced at that level. So for them to go out and then, put Amari Cooper on the roster, Amari Cooper and his gargantuan $800,000 worth of salary left. It makes all the sense in the world for a team like Bills who didn't have the cap space to work with. The Jets did. I thought Cooper made a lot of sense for some of these wide receiver needy teams that were more pressed because of the way that contract had been rejigged around by the Cleveland Browns, who Kevin Stefanski through gritted teeth, perhaps, as he continues the line that Sean Watson will be quarterback over at Cleveland, selling off a key part there. And it makes an amazing amount of sense. But on a day where perhaps there's been some tumult in other parts of the NFL ocean, perhaps down in North Texas, it's interesting to see that Amari Cooper fetched more in draft capital. I know the salary is different now than 2 years ago, but going for a day 2 pick this time around when he was a begrudging day 3 pick when he was traded by Dallas to Cleveland a couple years ago.
Yeah, I think that the salary is the big difference maker. It's very odd on the part of the Browns, man. Like, Amari wanted a new deal this summer. They didn't want to get that done. They ended up restructuring him to make all of his money guaranteed money, which usually makes a player untradeable, right? Like, once you do that, you're admitting, okay, we're not going to move on from this guy. And so we'll just pay him his money guaranteed now, and then we won't move on from him later. And then, right, 6 short weeks later in the NFL season, obviously Amari has not been having a good time in Cleveland, has been very vocally, clearly frustrated on film. Amari's out, and now they have to eat all that money that they gave him for 6 games that were completely meaningless in the grand scheme of things. I mean, the passing offense did not work. And so, yeah, the money is a big part of the reason why the trade compensation is different. I think this is really, really good for Buffalo. I think this is ceiling raising Super Bowl caliber deal for Buffalo. Like the moving on from Stephon Diggs and kind of going to this wide receiver by committee spread and shred approach had a lot of wisdom to it. And I think there's been clear benefits, but whenever the Bills offense gets stuck, it's because they don't have a guy who can go get him a bucket, right? We had multiple Mac Hollins end zone targets again last night. Like, enough with this, right? Like, you need a guy who can kind of go and win you your one-on-ones when you're in that bad down and distance, when the base offense is going to work. You just need a winner. And like, that's Amari Cooper to a T. He clarifies Keon Coleman's role. They don't have to ask Keon to do that now. He can be more of that vertical outside the numbers player. Clarifies Khalil Shakir's role. He can just continue to win in the slot. Like, this is as good of an addition as it gets. I think they're probably in on Davante, and once that domino fell, then they go and they get the Cooper deal done. It looks like a 1-year rental, right? Which is a little bit expensive for a 1-year rental, but hey, you have Josh Allen. Chiefs don't look too great. AFC might be open. Let's make a push.
For a 1-year rental, you get a guy who's 30, a couple years younger than Adams, and Josh Allen year over year. Last year, if you ranked his top 5 wide receivers in receiving yards, 4 of them left. And you guys have already explained why there hasn't been that, or how there hasn't been that kind of backfill. If you look across the NFL, only Jacoby Brissett, Will Levis, Justin Fields have averaged fewer completions per game to wide receivers than Josh Allen's 8.5. It's great when it's working, when they're in that like Big 12 personnel, or some kind of 12 personnel with 6 linemen, whatever, and they're getting going downhill. But when they needed to spread it to a wide receiver, we saw 2 of the last 3 games, the 2 losses averaging 15 points per game, never really got things going to those receivers. And last night, mentioned the Mac Hollins targets in the end zone. It's just, I think they figured out their ceiling, and you would hope that Cooper raises that. So we go now to our Dirty 30 Awards. And for anybody who's newer to the show, Ben's newer to the show, we explained this to him. We do, like, you have the Heisman Trophy and the Bolitnikoff Award. We like to honor some of our, revered pieces of cultural significance of yesteryear with the names of these awards. Laz, I painted that picture, right?
You did. This captures, and this is something that, perhaps Ben being shamefully young for this show. He's really bringing the youth, but him along with producer JT representing Gen Z strongly here, as me and Phil, a couple of 30-something dads, reach back into... you said yesteryear. It's like yesteryear at this point. But yeah, it captures the formative pop culture moments of our
the
childhood.
First one's 30 years old. So.
It is. The first one's, I believe, checking the rundown, the first one has a sequel coming out quite soon. That is the Chubbs Peterson Award. For those that don't know, Chubbs Peterson, the infamous golf coach in Happy Gilmore, and key figure in the I was wrong, you were right, I am, you are handsome, I am not very good looking, mea culpa.
You're smart, I'm dumb.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thanks, buddy. Or was that directed at Ben? That was okay. That was directed at Ben. So this is our big mea culpa, our early season or preseason take that we just didn't land, that aged about as well as milk outside on a hot, sunny Sydney day. And I'm happy to kick this one off because it blends in quite nicely. We had a hot take submitted early on, right off the bat, from Brad Bolt, one of friends of the show, one of the great members of our viewing and audience show community. And Brad said that, he really thought Jaden Daniels was going to be out there for Offensive Rookie of the Year, that was going to come home. And I stepped back and I poured a little cold water on that at the time hot take, because not as a shot at Jaden Daniels, more at the Commanders. I didn't think they'd be able to win enough games. I didn't surrounding supporting cast would be able to carry him to that competitive record that tends to pair up well with quarterbacks winning these off-season or end-of-season, end-of-year awards. And boy, was I wrong, because the NFC East has completely capitulated around Washington at this point. Have a look at what's going on in Dallas. We know the New York Giants have flashes of, light at times, the likes of Tyron Tracy and Malik Neighbors when he's fit and healthy and out there. The Philadelphia Eagles, I think, like the Cowboys, have probably been worse than their record suggests. Meanwhile, the Commanders are getting, at the core of it, I think the production they're getting on the offensive line has been far beyond what many people expected. Hands up accountability there. And it's laid the platform for Jaden Daniels to set an absolute tear and go off on a hellacious pace to start his rookie campaign. So the idea that I could pour cold water on Jaden Daniels, now the absolute bona fide front-running favorite to win Offensive Rookie of the Year over the past 5 or 6 weeks, has aged shockingly. So for that, I was wrong. You were right. I am dumb. You are smart.
Ben, who's your Chubbs Peterson award?
Yeah, I had Jaden Daniels as well. Coming out, I like Daniels. I thought Daniels was going to be an explosive player. I thought he would be a fireworks player. Did not think he would be a consistent down-to-down player, especially early on. The Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury brain trust there, kind of running things in Washington, I didn't think necessarily going to elicit the best from Jaden. Thought this line was going to give a lot of pressure. It was going to kind of bring out his worst demons in terms of running around and taking a lot of sacks and scrambling a bunch. And he's just been so delightful throwing the football. I mean, it's just been impossibly accurate to all three levels of the field. They've worked, I think, really well to get him pass catchers, like guys like Luke McCaffrey, guys like Olamide Zaccheaus, Zach Ertz. Like, didn't think you were going to get a lot out of these dudes, and they have, because Daniels is just hitting them consistently. And then obviously we all know that Terry McLaurin's that guy and has been for a while. And so I did not think we'd get this level of early success from Jaden Daniels. I thought it'd be a much more herky-jerky. I thought it'd be really high peaks, really low valleys, and you'd be worried about the guy getting hurt and taking a ton of pressure. But so far, I mean, so good. Ravens game, like they start to slow down a little bit on offense. They don't get the win, but you go and you watch it and you're like, oh, like, it's not like he got solved. Not like he got figured out. It's just they lost some games in the margin. They're not as good running the football against such a good defense. Like, arrows big up for Jaden Daniels, and I thought it was going to be all over the place. So kudos to him.
Well, I mean, and I'll say I was on board with all of what you were saying. I didn't think Washington had the roster around him for him to integrate so seamlessly into the NFL. And beyond that, I mean, probably be closer to Offensive Player of the Year consideration than he is to relinquishing his position as Offensive Rookie of the Year favorite. But my Chubbs Peterson award is going to go to the Minnesota Vikings. Laz, I said on the show when we did our preseason prop kind of thing and outlook, and a lot of our awards here are based on those opinions, whether we were right or wrong. I said with Minnesota to take their under 7.5 wins prop, but not just to take it, to let them beat the Giants in week 1 and then hammer that line, because I thought it might inflate a little bit and then hammer the under, which it did. That part was right. But at 5-0 heading into their bye, it would take an historic collapse for under 7.5 wins. This isn't a betting analysis. The Vikings are far better than I thought. I thought they were going to be a distant 4th place in the NFC North. I mean, the NFC North, every team's 4-2 or better. Now, they haven't really played each other yet. They're going to start to cannibalize once that division goes on. But I don't think this is going to be a repeat of 2016 for Minnesota when they started 5-0, went into a bye, and then finished 8-8, I believe. They really staggered to the finish. I think they're coming back to the pack, but this is going to be a team that I would say at worst is in wild card contention. They're not going to fall off the face of the earth. So Kevin O'Connell being able to pivot and get a lot out of Sam Darnold has been quite impressive. So we'll give a Chubbs Peterson trophy to US Bank Stadium in downtown Minneapolis. Next up is the Mike Jones Award. This is a new one, Laz. This is one that I pitched to you this year because I don't know where I was, but I heard one of Mike Jones's finest tracks. Back then you didn't want me. Now I'm hot, they all on me. Back then they didn't want me.
That's the
now
Disney
I'm hot,
version.
and they all on me. Ben, who gets your Mike Jones Award?
I have Liam Cohen, who's the offensive coordinator for the Bucs, because this Bucs offense, I think, like, I almost put Chris Godwin for this, right? There you go. I almost put Chris Godwin for this, the Bucs wide receiver. I almost put Baker Mayfield. I think probably last year could have put him for this, where it's just a couple of guys who, okay, the production was down, maybe the cast-offs, this isn't working. Okay, Dave Canales, he gets hired away. A Bucs OC, now he's the Panthers head coach, and they're going to bring in Liam Cohen. And Liam Cohen was a guy who Rams coach Sean McVay, and then he went to the college level and he tried to come back to the NFL level. It didn't work too well. He went back to the college level, and now here he is, Bucs offensive coordinator. And it's like, all right, like, I don't have very high expectations for a guy who's just been bouncing. He's had 4 different jobs in the last 4 years. I think that Canales was really a sharp mind. I don't think he's going to be able to replicate that level of success. And then here you are, the Bucs are 4-2. They just put 51 points in the New Orleans Saints. Everything's working for him, right? Mike Evans is playing well. Chris Godwin's playing well. He's got Rashad White, Bucky Irving, Sean Tucker. Like, there's 3 different backs that do stuff for them. They've got an offensive line that's been dealing with injuries. They've been picking up every single problem there. Baker Mayfield scrambling the football. Like, there's just nothing on the Bucs offense right now that isn't effective. And I think it's been a big surprise, because even in your rosiest projections preseason, it was okay. Like, maybe if they can keep 90% of what they did last year and be the 14th best offense, like, it just did not feel like the ceiling was going to be this high with a quarterback like Baker Mayfield in there. So I think big ups to Liam Cohen, who just was not a name that people were talking about in terms of OC jobs and guys who were going to kind of try some new stuff and find some new things on offense. And he's been able to do that down there in Tampa. So kudos to him.
And just look at their win there that you mentioned, the 51 points against the Saints. They had 220 rush yards in the second half, 172 in the fourth quarter, even when it was that predictable, hey, this team's finally got some margin in a game that was back and forth for the first half. whether it was inside the tackles, outside the tackles, yards before contact, these huge cavernous or chasms opening for Tampa Bay Bucky and his pals in the backfield there for the Bucks. Really impressive because we know Baker, his gunslinger mentality, 325, 4 touchdowns, 3 picks, but all confined to the second quarter. He was nice and consistent with those. Laz, who you got for Mike Jones?
Yeah, at anytime wide receiver money gets handed out in that kind of mid wide receiver 2 area, it tends to bring on takes because I think there's a perception that you can't, you could have got this guy for $6 million or $7 million. But Darnell Mooney gets the nod for me. Getting through, I believe, $13 million a year this offseason, go down to the Atlanta Falcons. And perhaps the perception around the Falcons, like, oh, good, here's another, talented skill position player that's going to, fade into anonymity down there in Atlanta with their inefficient use perhaps of Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and everybody's favorite could be tight end Kyle Pitts. But this man, Mooney, at 360 odd yards, a handful of touchdowns already on the season, is pacing a lot of his red zone or his end zone production. He's pacing his yardage production after it never really came to fruition in just the glorious offensive ecosystem that has been the Chicago Bears over recent seasons. So for me, it's Darnell Mooney because this was one of those deals, and not just from myself, but from across the NFL literati and fandom and public and media over the offseason that got a lot of eyebrows raised. And people said, really? Him? And there is always that guy in the offseason. There is that wide receiver that gets that. I mean, I think of someone like Michael Gallup, who is no longer in the NFL, but was someone who was handed that type of contract, and it always raised, oh, really, that guy in that who hasn't had a hyper productive role in a supporting role almost in a previous offense. I'm going to unload that type of cash, particularly as I mentioned, on a team in Atlanta where the offensive skill talent wasn't really the question mark there. It was how you're going to use it. So Mooney setting pace for a career year, doing it with some phenomenal speedy splash plays and doing it with more nous in his receiving game than perhaps he's been given credit for in previous seasons. Yeah, a little sunshine for Mr. Mooney.
I'll be quick with mine because we've already talked about the Commanders and how well Jaden Daniels has integrated with our Chubbs Peterson honorees. My Mike Jones award, in the spirit of back then they didn't want me, Dan Quinn. Laz, you and I talked about this move and how for some teams it wasn't a sexy enough hire on paper, but we joke, the Washington offense jokes, the whole college offense criticism that I believe it was Cam Taylor-Britt said before the Bengals Commanders Monday night game that Jaden Daniels went out and set a rookie record for completion percentage. Dan Quinn and the buy-in he has, how he's really bifurcated responsibilities well, I think, with that offense and Cliff Kingsbury and what he's doing as a defensive coach. And it was really interesting. I was on the sideline for that game and being able to watch Quinn be the head coach, but also when Joe Burrow led a pretty easy scoring drive, he turns around and he's there looking at tape with the guys, hat on backwards. He looked like a position coach while being head coach and able to then seamlessly then go put on his head coaching hat, something that I watched Jeff Ulbrich struggle with in moments and spells in the sideline yesterday. Really gained a lot of respect for how Dan Quinn's kind of layered things in Washington, and we know he has head coaching experience in the past and coordinating. It just all seems to be coming together. And I would go out to say, if Washington ends up winning that division and Minnesota does not win theirs, Dan Quinn's going to get a lot of Coach of the Year votes. And that's a big stride for where we thought this was going to be with Washington heading into this season. So Mike Jones Award on its way to Ashburn, Virginia. While we're talking coaches, the Denny Green Award. Denny Green, the late Denny Green, famously at a press conference, they are who we thought they were, and we let them off the hook. This is just the first half of that. They are who we thought they were. Mine, I'll be real quick. The Jags. I sold on them hard in the going into the offseason. Said they were going to miss the playoffs by a lot. I feel really good about that. I was surprised Doug Peterson was not the first coach let go, not calling for anybody's job, but they are violently underperforming, just sunk a ton of money into their quarterback. And I would think if they don't come out of London with at least one win, it could be a similar cadence to Robert Saleh coming back home stateside. And as soon as he sets his feet on American soil, he's no longer the head coach of the team. So for me, the Jags are who we thought they were. Ben, who gets your Denny Green Award?
I wrote Jalen Hurts and the Eagles offense because I think that we were sold a big bill of goods this summer, right? In terms of, hey, we're bringing in Kellen Moore. We're reimagining how the offense is going to work. There was that big quote, 95% of the offense is new. So, all right, we're going to be under center more, do more pre-snap motion, and we're going to throw over the middle of the field. And there's all these big plans. And then it turns out through 6 weeks, we're running AJ Brown on isolation, right? We're doing quarterback run game from the gun. They are running more pre-snap motion. Technically, a lot of it is just shifts, right? It's nothing that's not like snapping it with a guy flying across the formation the way you see the Niners and the Dolphins do. Like it's juking the numbers, but it's not really having a huge impact on the offense. Like they're still running the Jalen Hurts offense. They are who we thought they were. It's not totally a bad thing. This has been successful for the Eagles in the past. Their running game continues to be excellent, but the idea that the Eagles passing game was going to become something new, right? With Kellen Moore, with Jahan Dotson, it just hasn't happened. This is the same passing offense it's always been. When there's no AJ Brown, no Davante Smith, we saw how ugly that looks. Get those guys back in there, starts to look a little bit better.
I'm going to save the really heartfelt, perhaps self-hatred for a later segment with where I go with this one, because I've been tossing up options. And I'm going to say Deshaun Watson. I thought he was busted as a quarterback last season. I think the evidence was there, and Browns fans and Browns defenders in my mentions telling me that sample size, look at the offensive line, Chubbs been out, or this receiver, Njoku's been hurt. The sample size is big enough now. Anytime that over a full season sample size, you rank 30th or worse in every considerable quarterback metric, old school numbers, new school next gen stats, CPOE, adjusted yards, like air, like just anything you want to throw out there. When you rank that low down, EPA per play, EPA versus the rush, like it is undeniable how poorly Deshaun Watson is playing at quarterback now. You can even hear through the quotes, Kevin Stefanski's out there saying, he will still be our quarterback. And when pressed, whether this was an issue, whether this was coming from upon high, whether this was coming down from ownership, he said, no, football decisions lie with me, and we have a really good dialogue between myself and the general manager and ownership. Sure thing. There's not a chance that if this was a pure meritocracy, Deshaun Watson would be the starting quarterback for this Cleveland Browns. Not even adding into the equation in this moment the serious off-field baggage and allegations and everything that comes with what Deshaun Watson has presented over the past several years. So I thought he was washed coming into the season. He has been probably worse than washed. So as much as we took mea culpas off the top, it's not a victory of that, because I don't feel particularly nice about it. I don't think anyone feels particularly nice talking about Deshaun Watson, but he has been horrendous in every measurable way. And there's a massive, massive karmic payback coming towards the Browns with the money that they shelled out, the draft capital that they shelled out, bringing him in, knowing what they did. And this is where we stand 6 weeks in.
Laz, Bill Barnwell posted today some really eye-opening numbers. Since 2007, of 566 qualified quarterbacks, Deshaun Watson ranks dead last in first down rate through 6 games. And he's second from bottom, so 565th in yards per dropback. From a team standpoint, you can push that back to 2000, 798 teams through 6 games. They have the second worst third down conversion rate and the fourth most offensive penalties. It is historically bad offensively for a Browns team that is at the bottom of their division, and $230 million guaranteed. You and I questioned on this show the wisdom in that when it was signed, and the case has been built against it. So that is the runaway winner for me for the Denny Green Award. Laz, our next award, I'll let you explain because this is your brainchild.
Yes, as we move on down, this is the Han Lu Award. And for those that are fans of the Fast and Furious franchise, you'll be well aware of the
By the way, none of these references are younger than 15 years old on these awards. I think this might be fine.
Look, we are who they thought we were, Phil. We don't hide around this, Anytime anyone in this show of the two of us that are here week in and week out, other than my sick week last week, blend into young parlance, that's why we call each other out on it. So yeah, our references are dated, but he burst onto the scene. He burst into our lives in Tokyo Drift and was swiftly taken away. Or so we thought, the character Han. He was brought back improbably from what we thought was the end, brought back to life. And this is about a current player whose career has truly whipped around, a true, I've heard these degrees misquoted lately, a true 180 degrees in form, in standing, in status in the NFL. Someone who was written off. Han was written out. These guys were written off. They were written out of the NFL script, and yet here they are back in a prime role. And look, laying all that out, this award could only go one way for me. And Phil, I think we're in accordance here, and that is Mr. Darnold in Minnesota. I mean, a quarterback that had become one of the biggest punchlines in recent NFL history. Everything from the seeing ghost quote that was caught on mic to the incredibly chaotic and poor tape that we saw in terrible and unsupportive surroundings in New York. The signs of brief life, particularly running the ball into the end zone in Carolina, the rehabilitation as a quarterback that went underway over in San Francisco, and then landing in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell. Talk about a couple of great quarterback scenarios to find yourselves in, working in the Shanahan system with Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco and having time to rebuild there. And then with Kevin O'Connell, who gets the tag as one of, if not the preeminent quarterback guru, whisperer, coach, whatever it is in the NFL today. But being this productive, leading an undefeated team, having the type of production where you can think of the flash plays, the 97-yard touchdown to just Justin Jefferson from the shadow of his own goalposts. But there's more than that. There's throwing guys open. There's anticipatory trust, firing at the numbers, firing into non-existent tight windows, but having the trust with his receivers because he sees a defensive back, turning their back and seeing the back of their jersey and knowing where he can go with the ball. Trust in that system. Trust in his physical talent that's always been there and just a more calm presence. Yes, we still get those Sam Darnold moments. We get the fumbled handoff here or the pitch that goes awry. But by and large, this has been a remarkable turnaround in form for someone that was never set up to succeed in previous stops, particularly New York, but has taken center stage, is sitting there at the top of a loaded NFC North right now with then, impeccable 5-0 record coming out of the bye. But for me, this is Sam Darnold, a heartwarming one. I was a defender of him coming out. I was a fan. As we mentioned on this show, I may have made a very strong wager after a long day of fantasy drafting about Josh Allen's career versus Sam Darnold, that talk about mea culpas and things that haven't aged quite well. But I'm very happy to be sitting here. And I think, Phil, you feel similarly.
Yeah, I agree completely. He's my vote. It's in the rundown. You can confirm that. I'm more curious, Ben, Hanlu Award for you. Are you going Sam Darnold or are you going elsewhere?
I chose someone who far more recently looked maybe dead and probably not actually, but I picked Kirk Cousins as the quarterback for the Falcons. Just after that week 1 game, it was kind of like, all right, this can't work, right? He can't move. Okay, he's off the Achilles. It's our first look at him. They go against the Steelers and they just can't go under center. They can't run play action. He's stuck in the pocket. I thought it was chalked. I thought we were completely done. And I thought that the Mike Penix selection, such a surprising pick in the 2024 NFL draft, was a result of the fact that the Falcons realized that they were Hanlu when it came to Kirk Cousins, that he just wasn't going to be able to play for them moving forward. Then week 2 got a little better. Week 3 got a little bit better. Week 4 got a little bit better. They're still they don't run boots. They don't pitch the ball. They're not doing a lot of the stuff that you'd like to be able to do if you had a quarterback who was physically capable, right? If he was able to move on the Achilles the way you'd expect. But they found a way to make this work, right? And you had a wonderful performance against the Bucs in week 5. Panthers in week 6. Not the best defenses. The Bucs were super banged up, so I still have my question marks. But in general, Kirk is back, right? He's back from the dead, and they're able to make offense work there in Atlanta. So I gave the Hahn Award to Kirk.
I like it, man. We talked about the Jags, in past years going to London to find their chemistry. Kirk Cousins kind of doing the same, going to Drake London and building some chemistry. Last 3 games, 24 catches, 292 yards, 2 touchdowns. So that's, do the averages, 8 catches, 97 yards a game on 35 targets over 3 games. So he's averaging 8 of 12 targeting London, 97 yards. You build some rapport outside. They got the thunder and lightning of Algier and Robinson. It just, God bless. It was so predictable in week 1, like we were talking about. Hey, if they're in pistol, they're running. If it's shotgun, they're throwing. And against the Steelers, it was, letting that defense read their mail, which was a disaster. So credit to Atlanta. And just the fun thing about the Falcons, aside from this past week, whoever was winning the game through 3 quarters just isn't going to win the game. And it's just, and for a neutral, that makes things interesting. Our last award is the Evanescence Award, which is similar in spirit, but it's more bringing somebody back to life in that we get to go out and find somebody who is no longer a part of a team, a franchise, and bring them back to life with the team for the sake of that team. So, Ben, these awards are pretty adjacent. So we delineated. You're a smart guy, University of Chicago educated. So you grasp it straight away. Who's getting your Evanescence Award?
Yeah, I mean, I would pull Aaron Donald out of retirement for the Rams, and that'll probably be my answer for the award for the next decade, right? First, I'd like to watch him play.
33.
Yeah, for another decade. He's still young. But the Rams team, I remember in the preseason saying like this might be the worst defense that we see. And there was a lot of faith in okay, but the new young guys in the defense and Kobe Turner was so good last year and they're going to do some creative stuff. And they have some secondary options. And like a lot of the reasons for optimism with the Rams defense actually came true. Like Kobe Turner is still playing well. Jared Verse, the first round rookie, has looked good. Like they are being creative on the back end. The problem is just Donald's gone. And so it's going to be bad. Like you cannot recreate Aaron Donald in the aggregate. You can't moneyball the guy. It is one of the best, if not the best defensive player that we've seen in the last 3-4 decades. You miss him and the absence is going to be felt. So now the Rams are 1-4. They're coming off the bye week. The NFC North is a tough race. Like they're not technically out of it, but Stafford is still so good and McVay is so good and the wide receivers are going to come back and, what if they make a push? But then I remember that I can't trust this defense the way it's currently constructed for the rest of the season to get them enough stops, get them enough wins to take them seriously. And so if I get Donald back on that team, I'd be interested. As it is, I cannot.
28th in total defense, 29th in scoring defense, 26th in rush yards allowed, and only the Falcons have fewer sacks per game. Aaron Donald took up 2 positions. It's why he was 8 times a first-team All-Pro and 3 times Defensive Player of the Year in 10 years. And Ben, I agree with you. Go ahead and pencil that in for me until about 2028. 33 years young. Fans are campaigning. His wife's doing selfie videos on the couch like, nope, he's content. He's got his money. He's got his Super Bowl ring, Super Bowl 56. But if I had my way, if this were a Madden, exercise, it would benefit that team, both from a leadership standpoint and obviously schematic, to have number 99 back in the fold. Laz, who's getting your Evanescence award?
Yeah, I really toyed with this one. I didn't know how heartfelt to go here. I thought about Julius Peppers with the Bears, and that'd be a whole lot of fun, putting him up front there on a team that's got themselves to 4-2 going into the bye week. Peppers actually has a couple teams that you could opt for there, but I wanted to go with the midway there. A lot of Chicago talk in the past 5 minutes, but I think I'm going to go with a draft pick that wasn't actually that long ago, but he's been missing. He's been out of the game for a couple of years now. After really storming the first 3 seasons and being you talked about Aaron Donald as being, best defensive player last 3 or 4 decades. Aaron Donald for me is probably the best pure football player that I've ever watched. I think it's probably between him and Mahomes at this point. Over the 15 or so years I've been watching. But this was another player that his contemporaries on programs like the NFL 100 and Top 100s and stuff, that he was talked about as some players thought that's the best football player I've ever seen. And he's been gone for a couple of years now. And I know the Dallas Cowboys would love to be running the ball. It's an absolute hot mess down there. The comments from Jerry Jones today, just adding to that, both at the owners' meetings and on the fan in Dallas. The temperature is heating up in a really bad way, but I know they want to run the ball. So I'd bring Ezekiel Elliott out of retirement. As far as I know, He's been out of the league for some time now. After storming those first 3 seasons in particular, he's been gone for, a couple of years now. I think there were some rumors that he was retiring up in New England or something a couple of years ago. But yeah, I'd go find Zeke and bring prime Zeke out of retirement and put him on this Cowboys team because I know they just really want to run that rock.
So that's our Evanescence award. Aaron Donald gets a couple, and Ezekiel Elliott, if we've seen him, we'll get the other one. Cowboys, what are we up to now? 20 straight games without a 100-yard rusher or something like that?
Was it the Colts that had that record for a long time? And I think Cowboys might be taking.
Don't worry about looking it up because it's about to change. We're going to have to update the stat. All right, that'll do it for our Dirty Thirdy Awards. Sometimes we do a Dirty 230 if we feel so inclined after week 12. Stay tuned. We figure out this rundown the day before. But Laws, now it's time for a Brekkie Show staple. Phones have been ringing off the hook with Ben in the frame. It is time for the Hot Take Hotline, brought to you by Macca's. Our first hot take comes to us from Oz. Ben, Oz Laws would have worked so well, but I'm teeing up Ben on this. We have somebody who is, he's a popular fellow in the Hot Take Hotline. I would have thought maybe he'd be working or owning some restaurants in the fast food industry by this point, but he's still kicking it around the NFL. Flacco is the best QB on the Colts. How hot is that? Is that a hot take, Ben? Do you agree, disagree?
It's patently inaccurate. It's just flat wrong. So however hot that is. I wrote about Richardson and Flacco in my column this week. I don't think anybody really watches Richardson play. I think they watch like the first 3 clips to get on Twitter, the best 3 clips to get on Twitter, look at the box score and kind of go from there. If you listen to the Colts talk about Richardson, like they love him. They think they have Josh Allen. Like they're over the moon. They think they have the league like absolutely like to the pins just screwed. They've got him. Richardson gets hurt, right? This has been the issue. Is he has not been available. He's been banged up. Now he's like, when he plays, the peaks are extremely high. The valleys are super low, right? It's been a massive roller coaster. He absolutely misses big throws. Like, he throws bad interceptions. But the only way to get out of that is to get through that. The only way to get out of that is to get reps and to get him out there on the field. And so the Colts were smart to go get an established veteran quality backup in Joe Flacco. Shane Steichen is a good schemer and knows how to work around the guy. But we all know who Joe Flacco is, and we all know who the 4th overall pick in the 2023 NFL draft was. We know who the better quarterback is between those two. And so, yes, I'm happy that Steichen is scheming around Flacco well, and I'm very much enjoying late career Flacco. He just throws anything. It's like, okay, the guy's got like a quarter of a step. I'll chuck it. Who cares? Like, it's very entertaining to watch. The best quarterback of the Colts is unquestionably and emphatically Anthony Richardson.
I hard agree here. Look, I love the Flacco resurgence and the renaissance, and we'll get into that with a follow-up hot take here that might perhaps be a little more to our taste. But no, Anthony Richardson, it's a peaks and valleys conversation, as you mentioned there at the top. And just some timing and some patience is required here. That man has played a handful of NFL games. Yes, he's been hurt, and that's tough to see. But what that combination between him and Steichen has been, the flashes that we've seen, this is something that I feel like the criticism, and as you mentioned, no one watches him. They're just watching the few plays they see on Twitter or choose your social media platform. But it feels like it's a carry-on from some of the inaccurate tags that he got coming out of college and coming out of Florida. People said, oh, he's crazy raw, and he didn't have to do anything pro-ready, and he didn't have any, like, the responsibilities on him at the at the college level just weren't there, and he was wildly inaccurate. And like, when you actually watch what he was doing at the line of scrimmage, what he was asked to do was far more developed than that kind of easy slap superficial tag that was placed on him. Not to mention that, I mean, talk about route running. Some of the routes that we were seeing from some of those Florida receivers, I remember watching some of that tape when he was in the draft class, kept me up at night with nightmares. It was terrifying. But no, I agree with you there. Tell you what, some of the commentary coming in here on our special guest here today, Brad, good morning, fellas. And, Ben Solak, my favorite person to listen to on a podcast. And people, what a time to be alive. From one Ben to another one. So the love is flowing in here. Ben Solak needs to be on more Aussie NFL shows. Well, we're happy to have him on our one this morning. Let's go to the follow-up hot take here, though, Phil, because it parlays quite nicely into it. Joe Flacco should be the starting quarterback for the Titans, Browns, or Panthers because the QBs they have are hot trash. From another Ben, that's from @Ben with no number. Clearly your Ben brethren are here in the chat today. All right, so Titans, Browns, Panthers, would they be better served right now with Joe Flacco under center?
Like, all of them, yes. All of them, the play would be better at quarterback right now. I think that, like, if you take the Titans as an example, like, the Titans it benefits the Titans so much more 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road to have Will Levis develop into something than it is to play Joe Flacco right now. You take the current losses that what Levis is offering you in the hopes that you can improve the player, and then now you have a rookie contract quarterback starter, a cheap starter for the next couple of years. Now, obviously, like, it hasn't been great with Levis, but when Levis goes out, Mason Rudolph goes in, it goes, okay, this is what this will look like with a backup, right? We can beat the bad Miami Dolphins. It's just like, if you were to put Flacco on the Titans, they'd be more functional for a year, and then they'd have the same problem in 2025. We need a new quarterback. We need a new young quarterback that you have if Levis is bad, right? And so, like, yes, they would be better short term, but the goal for the Titans right now isn't short term success. The goal for the Titans is figuring out if they have a quarterback of the future in Levis. So it behooves them to play him, even though he might be worse short term.
Yeah, and I mean that's the macro planning of these franchises. And to your point with the Colts, I don't fault people for not seeing the Colts a lot. They have one primetime game all season, and the only reason I think they have it is because they're playing the Jets, who seem to play 60% of their games in primetime. Only the Panthers have fewer preseason. I know we can start flexing things, but the Colts are just going to be one of these teams that quietly remain on a pretty thin AFC wild card fringe. If you start to look at it, I mean, after the division winners, the wild card seems wide open in the AFC. Joe Flacco's done his job keeping them afloat. Anthony Richardson comes back. Shane Steichen's going to tell him, please, for the love of God, don't get hurt against the Dolphins this weekend when you start, and continue to progress. And then, if God forbid, again, goes down with oblique, hip, shoulder, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, you have Joe Flacco there who can be the Band-Aid for 1 to 5 weeks if needed. Well, we're just talking about guys who are, I don't even want to say twilight for this guy because he is looking reinvigorated now with his new team. This take Ben comes from Dylan from OG. I always want to like read these in my head first, just in case somebody's trying to see more butts me.
I think that
Derrick
might be
Henry
one from IG. That might have been a typo in the rundown. Hands up accountability here. Chubbs Peterson award here. Let's stick to the form and the theme of today. There's the typo.
Dylan, you're an OG.
He is.
Derrick Henry, who had 86 of his 132 yards before contact in a win over the Commanders. Derrick Henry to become the oldest running back to win Offensive Player of the Year. Hot take, is it?
No, it's a solid take. I think that the league is, or excuse me, not the league, but voters are not necessarily going to want to give Lamar a third MVP award, and especially back-to-back MVP awards. Voters tend to move towards the newer thing, move towards the exciting guy, the guy who's never had it before. And so I think that if Lamar doesn't get the MVP award, which right now I think Lamar be maybe my vote, I think like top 2, top 3 on my ballot. If he doesn't end up getting it, I wouldn't be surprised if someone from the Baltimore offense needs to get some credit for what's going to be a historically productive running game. The Ravens now have 39 consecutive games with at least 100 yards rushing. If they have 5 more, they will beat the record that they themselves set in the previous iteration of the Lamar offense. And so I think if you get there, right, and Henry's doing this at his advanced age, yeah, he's a pretty good chance to win that award. I think that 15, 18 touchdowns, not outside the realm of possibility, 1,500 yards, not outside the realm of possibility. Like we're going to see a pretty unique season for a 30+ year old running back, especially in this day and age of playing the position. So not a hot take. I like that one.
2016 running backs giving them contracts late in their career. What could possibly go wrong? No, I firmly am in the same box there. It's interesting when you do talk about MVP voting because it's a narrative award and because it's not an objective award. You feel like the voting pool, you feel the move. It's like you feel the collective consciousness shift towards something different. But it's just been an absolute pleasure. I think I know if you're an AFC North fan that isn't a Ravens fan out there right now, perhaps it's not a pleasure watching. But from a neutral standpoint, just sitting back and watching how seamless this has been, and how in crucial game moments as well, Phil, I know perhaps we were talking about a certain line that Derrick Henry needed to go over in a recent contest, and a team that he was facing was doing a decent job, halting that run game to a degree, and yet late in the game, he still provides these huge chunk
51-yard carry. You heard one little voice in Bristol go, huzzah!
These chunk moments in these huge spots for a team, again, and this is something we've touched on, Phil, that has had some problems closing out games, closing out contests, and closing out double-digit leads in recent seasons. And we saw those issues start to flare up at the start of the season. Henry is the word I come back to is seamless. He's a seamless addition, a seamless asset to this operation. So, no, I think he's got an absolutely huge opportunity there, particularly with the way, as Ben mentioned, the MVP voting can swing.
Well, and plus 878 right now are the Ravens in rush yard advantage over the course of 6 games. If it sounds like a lot, it is. It's the highest in NFL history. And then to complement that with, all right, pick your poison, play action game for Lamar Jackson against the Commanders. He went 11 for 12, and 10 of those 11 completions went for a first down. So 12 times they're like calling a play action play, and 10 times they move the sticks. It's tough to stop, and fun to watch unless you're an AFC North rival. All right, we got one from Brucey in-house. Ben, our rugby reporter, Sam Bruce, says, quote, this is hot take hotline with this? I don't know. I agree with Aaron Rodgers about his roughing the passer call, and that's a scary place to be. I assume Brucey's saying it's scary to agree with Aaron Rodgers, not that is a roughing the passer call. Ben, what do you think? I think this is more broadly at large, the degree to which we're protecting quarterbacks and what it can mean in what would have been, I think, a key defensive stop for the Bills, which kept a drive alive in which the Jets ultimately got points.
Yeah, no, I think that was a bad call on AJ Epinesa, the roughing call, and I think that Rodgers is smart to criticize refereeing and then also to make sure he gets one for the Bills guys as well, right? Then it looks a lot better than when you're just complaining about the calls and maybe broke against your team. The landing, the weight on the quarterback penalty, like that aspect of roughing, it wasn't clear when it first got implemented and then it still remains unclear, but because like new and more unclear things get implemented every year and every year we kind of continue to forget about it. You could see Epenesa make an effort to not put his weight on the quarterback. You can also see that Epenesa is trying to hold Rodgers up like after he hits him and like not like punish him into the ground but slow his descent. Like if we're not going to credit guys for the effort of protecting the quarterback, then we're just in a position where like roughing can happen on any given hit at any given time, independent of the actual danger puts the quarterback in, which is really, really, really tough. And so shout out Rodgers for, I guess, commenting on it and bringing that attention. But like that rule's not going to change anytime soon. And the league's going to continue to call roughing really, really tight because that's where the money is with the quarterbacks.
I agree. I mean, at that moment where you see, like, you literally see Epenesa put his hand down into the turf to try and brace some of the weight and brace some of the content. You're already arguing defensive players to buck against physics with this rule, and it's gray application at best. And the fear is that obviously it's going to turn up in a huge spot in a playoff game and turn what should be a game-ending sack into a fresh set of downs for a team that goes on to march. And then we have the conversation: did we just send the wrong team on to the Super Bowl or to the wild or to the divisional round or to a conference title game? So look, it's not often that I see eye to eye with Aaron Rodgers' view of the world on a macro or micro sense, but here, credit to him for putting his honest thoughts out there that he didn't think that was a roughing call, and that the refs had that one wrong, and that kind of in a dodgy spot if that's the way this thing's going.
And we saw in the Sunday night, Monday morning game where Joe Burrow, I want to say it was Azeez Ojulari, had him dead to rights at his own like 5-yard line, but led up to the degree when he had Burrow that Burrow realized that the whistle hadn't blown and kept the play alive. And darn near broke off a pretty significant gain there for the Bengals. Don't worry, the Giants lead the leagues in sacks. They'll get enough. But we're seeing defensive players adjust, to an overcompensating degree. But still, these calls come in that any bipartisan viewer watching would say, dang, that's not roughing the passer. You wonder if there's an emphasis on replay assist to help out the referee. So it's not a talking point in a game of consequence. I agree. We're not going to make it. This isn't going to go back to like he got jacked up from yesteryear with, Deacon Jones clubbing somebody in the head. But at the same time, and these weren't, it's beyond a routine football play. It's somebody who is letting him down to the ground, like the Kevin Hart skit, that it's still not enough in a game where we have 10 million people just in the U.S. watching. Laz, you have one more. It says, if time. I think we have time. We do. Oh, boy. Trash talk with D-Bach on IG.
You bet. Yeah.
All right. Trash talk with D-Bach on IG says, Dallas won't win another game in the next month with their schedule. They're not losing next week. They're on a bye. Though the teams after playing the Lions, 0-4, average loss almost 22 points per game this year. I don't know if that's going to qualify for the Cowboys because they're off this week. But 22-point
loss would be an improvement for the Cowboys off their last
game. Worst home loss with Jerry Jones as owner. Bought the team 1989. Their worst home loss since 1988. Happy 82nd birthday, Jerry. I'm like losing track of the question. Ben, the question is, Dallas won't win another game in the next month with their schedule. Bye at San Fran, at Atlanta, Eagles and Texans at Jerry's World. You think they're going 0-4 in that schedule?
No, I think they're good enough. They have enough talent to win one of those games. Don't ask me to tell you which one. But I think that they have enough, right? Like Dak is good, CD's good, Mike is going to come back, Parsons is good, Dron Bland is going to come back from injury. He's going to help shore up some of the defensive problems. Like I have no delusions about the Cowboys as like a contending team and like a long-term serious team, but it's really hard to go 0-4 in the NFL, especially coming off of the bye. And like we've seen the Niners lose bad games, we've seen the Falcons lose bad games. Like these are the Eagles. These are far from perfect teams. They're obviously good teams, but these are not like 4 absolute juggernauts coming down the stretch for Dallas. And so things are bad for Dallas. They're going to stay not great, but an implosion of that level would surprise me for this team.
I think if there's one game that they take from that, I think it might be the Eagles contest, just because familiar opponent, you're at home. Their home record's been terrible. I think a split with the Eagles over the season makes the most amount of sense. Hold on, we've got a comment. It's not hard to go 0-4. Look at my Panthers; they do it regularly. That's right. Well timed. But I think when you look at some of the issues on defense, Mike Zimmer's talked about maybe I panicked early with some of the calls that he made, some of the changes that he made at home against a hated familiar opponent, with defensive effort being so key to defensive success. You think hopefully that unit gets up enough that they can rally to the ball, shut down Saquon Barkley, and as Ben touched on earlier, put the pressure on what's been a pretty underwhelming Jalen Hurts passing offense, particularly with some of the returning cattle that you do have. You expect you should have Bland and Diggs out there. Jordan Lewis has been playing decent football out of a lot of not decent football on that side of the ball for Dallas. But I think against the 49ers, we know what the 49ers have had over the Cowboys for some time now. The idea that the Cowboys run defense is going to stop either the scything explosiveness of Bijan Robinson or the bowling ball that is Tyler Algier on the ground before they even get to someone like a Drake London or a Kyle Pitts or my man, the Moon Man, Darnell Mooney. I think I just don't like that matchup for how they work in the trenches there and then how they're possibly going to slow down the base of that Atlanta Falcons offense. And the Houston Texans, I don't think there's a battle for Texas at this point. I think that battle's been won. I think there's one team that's so far a class above and is so far ahead in terms of putting their quarterback in position to succeed that, I think if there's one that they can jag, it's likely against the Philadelphia Eagles. Hopefully, the Eagles will have Jordan Mailata back by then, who's out for a couple per Jordan Mailata with a hammy.
Yeah, I mean, as I look at it, in a vacuum, I say each of those 60-40 for the opponent is probably the closest. No confidence in those matchups, but to Ben's point, you roll the dice enough times on a 60-40, even on the wrong side of the proposition, you'll come up once with somebody, Jalen Hurts throwing 3 picks, or the Falcons just not having any semblance of a pass rush. Dak goes out and throws for 360. It does feel doom and gloom. If they do go 0-4 in the next 4, I think Jerry Jones is just going to cancel his radio appearances in and around Dallas because there'd be no escaping there any issues with head coach security or anything of that nature. Laz, I think that wraps up the hot take hotline. We can put the phone back on the hook.
We can put the phone back on the hook, but before we do wrap up all our takes and our time with Ben, Ben, a known student of the game. Some call him a professor of football, a philosopher of football, but a tape grinder either way. Cannot question the man's credibility and commitment when it comes to putting the film on and having a look. And look, I know I'm the only member sitting here of the Commonwealth. You two proud red-blooded Americans, whereas I still, well, the profile on our money still is the royalty over in England. And we actually have some royal game tape to study here, courtesy of our teammates over in the ESPN UK offices. Thank you very much over to the Hammersmith office there. We have some tape of His Royal Highness, Prince William, throwing the pigskin around at an event, working with children in the area, promoting flag football, promoting the growth of the game. And obviously the international series is over in England right now. And so we're going to roll that tape. Producer JT, if you can cue that up, and we'll see, we'll just have a look at the form of His Royal Highness and really dive into the technique that perhaps Ben is seeing there. And maybe if there's any changes and tweaks to the composition as a passer that we can advise our other royal guest on the show today.
All right, square stance out of the shotgun. I don't know about that. That's not as bad as I thought it would be. That's pretty solid. He got good over the top motion. Didn't really step into it. Didn't really stride into it, but he got some distance on there. Kept it over the safety too. Good placement. I'm impressed. I'm impressed.
I've seen worse seam balls thrown this season. I mean, I think having a look at some of the targets Calvin Ridley targets in quotes got this week. I think he would appreciate some of the trajectory on the pass there from His Royal Highness. Phil, any warm fuzzy feelings to the monarch and the crown after seeing that tape?
Pros, twitchy release. Cons, hero ball tendencies.
Yeah, was a hero ball.
K1 grade.
That's what we want to see. Look, it's harder to coach the aggressiveness into a prospect than it is to coach them out of it. You want to see that willingness, Phil. You don't want to see these 2 yards per attempt at the college level or at the amateur level. You want to see them trying to push the ball down the field and come up with answers. Okay, no one's counting interceptions in training camp except every single beat writer in the NFL is counting interceptions in training camp.
Well, Ben, we really appreciate you joining us. Anybody who's watching, be sure to give Ben a follow on Twitter. Benjamin Solak, no underscores, no nothing, all down to business. ESPN NFL analyst, a brilliant football mind, delightful follow to listen and consume on any platform. We appreciate you adding the Brekkie Show to your CV again, my friend. Great shit to chat you. We'll chat again soon.
Appreciate it, fellas. Y'all take care.
Well, Oz, that'll do it for this edition of the NFL Brekkie Show. Ben Solak was magnificent. He stepped right in and embraced our awards. I think all but one of which are references from before he was born.
Well, look, we like to be welcoming when we have special guests on here, and what better way to do it by making someone feel young and fresh-minded as we have aged so gracefully into our 30s. One more before we get out of here. Brad wants to know if we can trade Bryce Young for Prince William. Do we have to include a 4th-round pick? I think at least a conditional 5 that accelerates to a 4th if he starts more than 4 games.
And just do it like the Jets did with the Raiders, a conditional 3rd that goes to a 2nd if Davante Adams is 1st or 2nd team All-Pro, or the Jets play him in the AFC Championship game or Super Bowl. That's not happening. That's a 3rd-round pick. So good on you, Joe Douglas, in that front office for just, if he's a 1st or 2nd team, never going to happen.
Oh, it's a fun league we follow, isn't it, Phil? Like to wake up this morning knowing we got the show. I woke up at 5 this morning, knowing I had a show in about 4 hours' time, roll over and have a look at the Twitter notifications. 130 alerts was what's sitting there waiting for me. I think there was a time when I probably would have woken up with those buzzers, but that time has since passed. As
just like the Undertaker, awake.
That's it. Oh, Phil, time to land the proverbial ship and get us on out of here. And hopefully I can start lifting my weight in popular demand in week 7. Sound like a nice idea?
As long as Spencer Rattler going for 200 yards doesn't mean my mighty Broncos take the L in New Orleans. He can throw for as many as he wants. But that'll do it for this edition of the NFL Brekkie Show, a 1/3 of the way through the regular season, honoring our Dirty Thirdy. We will see you not next week, Laws, right? We have our scheduled bye week, correct?
Correct.
So we are on a bye this week. You can rewatch this show if you want. This one, we'll take that.
None of it will have aged.
And maybe we'll throw a pivot in there, a little Easter egg somewhere. But otherwise, we will see you every Wednesday throughout the rest of the season. Same time, same channel. It's on the computer. It's on the internet. Same internet. Maz and I will see you then. Thanks for watching.